I'm super excited to have Jaan here. I think that most people here probably know a little bit of him or about him, or in fact, as we already discovered, have even met him. But I think you're interesting to interview in our fellow section and in our fellow program for two specific reasons. Once, because you're an incredible agent in the world. You have really done anything from a really wonderful physics degree to really developing much of the founding technology in Skype, to developing lots of other interesting games and technological companies. And then also really kickstarting a lot of the existential risk companies and communities that we really rely on right now to keeping existential risk at bay. And so you've done a ton of different interesting things, including investing, founding, funding, philanthropic engagement, researching, and so forth. And so I think it's really interesting just make for different people that are all at different stages in their career to discuss. And then the second thing why I think that you're a really wonderful guest is really because of your deep interest in the long-term future. So I hope we dig into both of them at their own pace. And yeah, maybe I'll start with a few questions. And if anyone from our audience wants to chime in at any time, feel free to either collect the questions in the chat or just raise your hand and then we'll loop you in. And so really just take my questions as first warm uppers and then you can go. But maybe Jaan, in your own words, could you describe perhaps your life story in Lesotho? What are you working on? How did you get to where you are? What were the different threads that kind of pulled you from one individual kind of stop in your career to the other?
Yeah. I don't know how to compress everything. Was born in occupied Estonia and found that computers are interesting. Lucky to work on some kind of Soviet-style mainframes before the occupation ended. Then occupation ended, entrepreneurship became legal, started my company, worked 10 years on producing computer games until graphics cards destroyed our business because we were mostly about programming and less about kind of story and art. And then But then it was 1999, which meant that it was a dot-com boom. And we got roped into web development. We had to kind of reorient. And that's basically moment where I stopped having an Excel sheet with runway because that was highly profitable. And after that, ended up, doing Kazaa with people I met at this web development gig. Then a bunch of other projects that didn't go anywhere. Then Skype. And once I started to transition out from Skype, I stumbled upon Eliezer Yudkowski's writing, and they struck me as something that seemed to be the most important thing that the humanity is not paying attention to. So I had a long meeting with him in March 2009, where we discussed these things, and I came out of it is that, okay, yep, that's my life mission now. And basically I positioned myself as someone who, can take those arguments that very few people are paying attention to, but can think of use my brand and street credibility to kind of sell it to people who kind of need some nudge from not just the arguments, but from who is saying those. And as a side effect, created Cambridge Center for the Study of Existential Risk, as well as Future of Life Institute. And then got into crypto along the way, bought my first Bitcoin for $1, and then diversified into other currencies like Ethereum. Yeah, I've been following crypto pretty closely. Now, currently trying to really think about what can we do to slow down the large language models, because we are currently reading alien minds in a way that is visible from space. The GPT-5 reading is taking, I think the calculation was something 7 megawatts, if I remember correctly. That should be visible. And importantly, they're not controllable minds. Microsoft did not have meetings about how can we make this agent more sassy and more threatening to our users. And it was just, they don't control it. So I'm very worried about what's going to happen with things like GPT-5 that's all now being trained and beyond.
Yeah, I hope that we get into all of that a little later too. I know that you've given some really, I think, good and also mainstream accessible talks also on AI and its long-term potential and risk. And I know that is your main focus area, even within existential risk. So I'm really dying to get into it. Perhaps a few words about how you got to where you were. You first really were a theoretical physicist, right? And I think you're...
Yeah, I wouldn't actually say that. I was kind of into computers. I was already sort of running a computer games business when I thought that I need to, basically, I graduated high school and then thought I need to study something and thought that, well, computer science, I know everything already. So it's why not take something broader? And so that's why I went into just to study physics, and I graduated as a physicist, which I think it has been was a great decision, but I never kind of worked as a physicist. So It was like a sidekick sort of.
Okay, so there was never actually like an intention of yours to perhaps stay in academia or work as a physicist. Got it. It's actually interesting. Like many of my physicist friends have eventually moved into AI, and so that there is a very big pipeline, I think, of folks.
Yeah, I saw this. There was like a draft by some famous physicist entrepreneur who of an article where he kind of claimed this, that if you look at those who are not worried about AI, they tend to be computer scientists, and who are worried about AI, they tend to be physicists, or at least like physics background. And then the bottom line was that perhaps it's time for computer scientists to have their own Manhattan Project movement, where physicists, according to that article, kind of started really worrying about potential damage to the world that they might be doing.
Okay, interesting. Wow. And so in principle, I mean, like the fact that you relatively quickly moved into the computer science kind of like industry, would you say that that is something specific to computer science? Or would you say in general, like you'd recommend folks to, even like when they're in chemistry or something, perhaps consider like spinning out a project into the real world? Or would you say that it's really relatively field dependent? And for you, it happened to be that in your computer science interest, that is just a better impact that you can be having?
Trying to compile. I'm not sure I understood the question.
Because we have many folks here on the call who are in academia, and then a few of them are working on the independent research projects, and a few of them are working like actually at companies or founding companies and so forth. And would you say that in general you'd recommend one path or the other, academia versus like the private sector, or would you say it's really just incredibly dependent on which area you're in, and there's not really like a kind of like a reason to be more operating in the private sector? I know that, for example, many folks even in academia are thinking of spinning out potentially eventually, but they're not quite sure whether they want to stay in academia. I
think both are like really stressful careers, but stressful in like very different ways. So yeah, entrepreneurship, like one of my portfolio company CEOs described it really funny. They said that like building a startup is like trying to push, what is that, like a square rock uphill, and with each moment it gets bigger. So it's kind of like can be like super stressful. In academia here, I've never spent career days in academia, but I just hear a lot of people seem to be like just super unhappy because of the stress and low pay, especially if you're not sort of like established, or if you're younger. But I don't actually have a good model about like how universal this kind of like stressful and occasion, like usually meaningless race in academia is. So it's possible that there are kind of corners of bliss there too.
Well, I can't believe that portfolio company compared startup to like a myth of Sisyphus.
Yeah, but with a square rock
falling down the hill at the top. Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from you, Jaan, how you are dealing with information overload. I feel like the last couple of months, I'm spending most of my OODA loop in the observe, orient phase, maybe partially decide, but then some new information comes out and I restart.
Yeah, I mean, I have some routines that I like websites. I mean, I've been every day like checking the news on Russian invasion of Ukraine because it's like literally close to home and like less wrong. And then I have a bot that scrapes hacker news and filters out stuff that I could be potentially find interesting. I do find that it is a problem. I should edit and linearize my information consumption more. But this is like investment thing. Like it has like an investment overhead. I would need to like actually get some code written that would inline some of that streamline and filter. So I don't think I'm like super great in having exemplary information management, but I think that's like a general advice, like have policies. So it's like have policies and routines. So I would say my information consumption is like just having like some set of routines and trying not to kind of like just binge on stuff that is just designed to be addictive or something.
I don't know if these days I spend usually my days with non-linear library, like the podcast and it's terrifying after a while because the output is so good because most
that's a good point. Like I do have sort of like one of the policies I have is that like when I do exercise or walk, then I listen to either books or podcast and have like a queue of those.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll just start with a few more questions about, I guess, like different decisions in your career path. And if anyone wants to ask any questions, please feel free to jump right in. I would love to see, I think the kind of like founding of the Center for the Study of Existential Risk and for Future of Life, like that takes so much coordination. Like it takes the coordination of like other co-founders. It takes the coordination of the financial resources to make it happen, and also some kind of like shared vision and so forth. So I'm really curious, like how did you kind of decide that you want to be involved really in these organizations in their inception? And then what was the kind of like coordination loop required to get everyone on the same page and get these two very different organizations going?
Well, it was kind of rather typical sort of startup founding story, sort of like you basically needed like one person who is like the lead initiator. In Cambridge, it was Hugh Price, who had just transitioned from Australia to UK and basically was looking for some entrepreneurial project in addition to just being like a philosophy professor or starting as a philosophy professor. And then I met him at the conference and convinced him that like existential risks are important. And he basically, it was sort of his project, both kind of putting the founding team together, that is like himself, myself, and Lord Martin Rees, finding funding for it. It took like actually 1.5 or 2 years to get it like fully funded. Like our initial application that he was like optimistic actually didn't go through. So he had to go back to doing the fundraising again. And in FLI, it was Max Tegmark. He had just finished like his Mathematical Universe book and said that instead of filling, he had cleared, to write the book, he had cleared his calendar from all sorts of crap. And he said that he was unwilling to put the crap back in. So I thought that he better put something more meaningful. And that's basically how FLI started. He recruited other 4 founders. And my own approach has been sort of, I kind of like, I have this, I call it like civilization resource model. Game of civilization. You have 3 or 4 kinds of resources that can map to resources that I can think of. So gold maps to finances, to money. Then production maps to attention. There's a bit of, need to squint a little. Then culture maps to brand. And so turns left is sort of like obvious resource. And so when I like propose us to be involved in various things, I kind of see what are my, in this like 4 dimensions, so 4 kinds of resources. Does that project shift those resources around in a way that addresses my resource bottlenecks, or is it like cheap enough to spend some of your resources to kind of get? I guess you can always look at this as like a resource trading. So like in FLI and Caesar, the main resource that I did contribute was my brand versus I did put in some finances to both as well, but like I'm not a majority funder of either.
I love it. The civilization model for making decisions there. Are there any other principles, for example, or does this model also map to, for example, let's say your other philanthropic funding decisions or even like your investment decisions, or are you using different models there from other games?
No, it does. So it's, I mean, obviously like investments, it's a simpler thing. You're trading. Well, actually, no. In investment, it is also like the one thing that I think is super useful to know when it comes to investing is that like brand is the most important thing, because like brand is more important than like ability to select. There is like one VC that kind of was bragging to me that they like look at like 1,000 opportunities and then pick one out of 1,000. I said, like, well, I invest in every second. So it's like just a matter. If your brand basically, your brand basically manifests in the pipeline quality. So I think that's like being consciously cultivating.
So for those of the folks on the call, perhaps that are like currently founding a new venture or like a new project, would you say, apart from focus on the brand, are there any other bits where like in your previous investments or like portfolio companies, you've seen that usually drives them to a better or worse trajectory?
Yeah. So like some heuristics that I have when it comes to, and I mostly delegated away my like investment legwork. I do make the final decisions, but most of the kind of cycles are actually spent by other people now. I do think that it's important to have some kind of story that makes sense. Like I think there's like this failure mode where entrepreneurs build something with investors in mind as their customers, which kind of I see where this is coming from, but it's like a version of good hearting. Like ideally you want to have, from my perspective, like you should have a story that makes sense, that and also has some important properties, like for example, enablers, like why this thing is possible now and wasn't like 5 years ago, and like sort of why what is the kind of advantage that you and your team has, particularly over the competition? Do you have some special experience that like is rare? And yeah, basically like why, also sort of like story for like why this is so. And in particular, myself, I'm very interested in things that you can't buy right now. So I'm less interested in kind of new startups that are making something cheaper, which kind of can be valuable, but it's like sort of, I find it like less interesting than like startups that are developing something that is just you can't buy no matter how much money you have right now. So yeah, things like that. There are more kind of criteria that I'm kind of forgetting right now, but these are some of the basic ones.
Yeah, I saw, for example, that I researched Pactum, which is this kind of preferred B2B negotiation and like chatbot.
Estonian startup, yep.
Yeah, really cool. And I researched them because I thought something like this should exist, and then it did exist. And then I saw that I invested in them once I looked at their website. Are there any others that you're really excited about? Because one could argue that it's possibly good for AI alignment, because I guess like bots will be trained on preferred negotiations of humans. On the other hand, it could also, I guess, lead to some kind of exploitability there. But in just in general, are there any other kind of investment opportunities that you were like particularly excited about? Maybe also having your long head on.
I find myself and my team kind of like drawn quite a bit to bio investments, just because like, the neighbors are like all over the place right now. So yeah, we have this pretty significant bio. Yeah, when it comes to, I think it was mentioned by one of the fellows, like biosensing stuff and kind of novel therapies and whatnot. Again, stuff that is now possible because of advances in AI, as well as mRNA, stuff like that, and are things that one can't just buy even if you had like all the money in the world. So these are like one big class.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I also like have this. I mean, I have this non-trivial amount of like AI investments. And this is like where the kind of the boundary between my philanthropy and my investing kind of starts to blur, but not to the degree that I would actually like it to blur. But yeah, like many of my AI investments are basically done in order for me to kind of like have a ticket to their kitchen and preach about AI safety.
Like the DeepMind one, I figure maybe one.
Yeah, DeepMind was pretty much the first one in that class.
Okay, cool. I like that. That took you to the kitchen. Are you using it a lot?
So one important thing that I've been kind of saying to entrepreneurs, that is one thing that people don't necessarily realize about VCs, is that like VCs have bosses. They know always half of the job is investing, but the other half is raising money. And they like, whenever they invest, they have to think about how does it look? How does that investment contribute to their ability to fundraise later from LPs? And I don't have that problem. So it's because I don't invest other people's money. So I can go to entrepreneurs and say that, look, if it turns out that we are potentially doing something dangerous, I'm totally happy to walk away from profits, because it doesn't make sense for me to push for profits in order to then use my other hand to donate things. I'm happy to just walk away from profits and consider it a donation. So that's I think the VCs cannot easily do. They still can, but like it's like they have to go against their incentives.
And have you used this and take it to the kitchen a lot to preach?
Yeah. So it's I do think that DeepMind was the most notable example, but yeah, I mean Anthropic is the most recent one, even though like they need much less preaching than DeepMind. I think DeepMind, still is. It was their last. It was December. Last December, and it's a big place, and the culture is not like homogeneous. So like I still bumped into people who were just like, "What do you mean AI could be dangerous?" So it's
Wow, even after Dema's big piece.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's I mean it's a like 1,000+ people company. So in some ways they're kind of reflection. They're closer to sort of general scientist population than Anthropic is, which is much more compact and culturally unified.
Well, since we're already on the thread of AI, why don't we dive in deeper a little bit more? I know that you're kind of like, a big worry of yours, and also caused some excitement on yours as well. The future with AI could also be really, really good. But yeah, I'm super interested in how the last, I guess, few months did you have any kind of, let's say, change of perspective in the past few months, or have you like changed your actions in terms of how you're spending your time, what you're advocating for now? I think you just mentioned that in the beginning that you're advocating for a slowdown now. potentially, if at all possible. Yeah, so I'm super curious just to get a little bit more into your current thinking on the topic and what you'd recommend folks do if they're mildly freaked out at this point.
For the last kind of 10 years, there's been this like outstanding question of like how far will deep learning take us? Is it that we are still missing some kind of important insights that we have to potentially wait for next 50 years to actually kind of get to something that is human level, as defined as in able to do its own inventions and build its own technology, and hence cut humans out of the loop when it comes to shaping the future of this planet? Or is it like, will deep learning kind of like take us all the way in a way that we just build bigger and bigger networks and suddenly you have this whatever insight forming sub networks and subgraphs just like naturally forming as a result of backpropagation pressure, optimization pressure. And I think the large language models that started from transformers is like definitely strong evidence that not super strong, but still pretty strong evidence that, yep, deep learning will take us all the way. Still uncertainty there. It's possible that we're going to run out of steam still. I wouldn't rule it out. But yeah, my majority bet is now that I know that's the end game. Like it's possible. Like I just wrote like a document for a memo about the need to slow down. And I gave basically my 90% confidence range is 1 to 50% chance of existential event after every 10xing of the training regime. So we basically, I think, basically my current model is that we're living with like several percent per year of X risk now. So everyone has like a cancer right now.
And do you have more concrete ideas on timelines specifically? I think that, what was it, Metaculous? I think yesterday the community prediction was at April 5, 2039 or something, but do you have any
Yeah,
more?
I mean, my timelines are in 20s, so I would be surprised if we kind of run out of steam in a way that like we can still be alive in 30s and look back that we still need to work on AI and the world hasn't changed as catastrophically for good or for. Yeah, basically, I think like even if we kind of ban all the giant AI experiments that are currently happening, even then like there would be like, I mean, GPT-4 level minds will outnumber humans, and they are basically smarter than median college student. So it's kind of hard to see like how the world will not be completely transformed as of this month. Plus like whatever inertia it takes for these things to proliferate. But like, of course, if we don't stop training, then yep, the next generation. Yeah, I think there's a several percent chance that every generation might be just completely wipe out life on this planet.
There was an interesting post, I think, on S1 on why the next decades might be wild, of laying out like almost year by year of what we get if we get like this information at just a much cheaper rate, even just with existing models, and like automating, exploiting vulnerabilities, computer attacks and so forth. And even that was like already like pretty bad if just like extrapolating outward where we currently are and where this may lead us soon enough, like rewriting the internet and potentially like with content that perhaps doesn't correspond to reality. So even if we just take where we are right now, I think it's already just extrapolating that outward is already pretty like it's a different world. So in terms of slowing down,
I mean, one sort of like optimistic note is that if you could stop these like giant AI experiments, and by the way, they will stop like naturally because we just run out of ability to throw money unprofitably at them. They're not profitable right now. These AI experiments are running at loss. They like the big experiments are costing more than you can run the resulting models before they are obsolete in like like 6 to 12 months. So they're not recouping the costs. And if you're going to 10x these costs a few times, you're like already at national GDP territory. So we will run out of steam at one point. But of course, like, is it like a late? It really seems that the step between 3 and GPT-4 was really, really, really big. So I'm not sure if we have many of those left still. But yeah, okay. Actually, I wanted to say a positive thing. Positive thing is that if you manage to kind of like stop the giant experiments, I do think that GPT-4 is sort of can be shaped. Like it still feels controllable enough, or chances seem to be good that GPT-4 level minds can be integrated into something that is like positive looking. Yeah, but with each successive generation, I'm kind of less confident in this.
Jaan, I was wondering, what ideas do you think are most promising for how we might slow down AI progress?
Current paradigm seems to be like super hardware dependent, and particularly requires this unprofitable massive training runs. So as I kind of say that like $1 billion project is hard. $1 billion project that is illegal is almost impossible. So there aren't that many $1 billion projects that are illegal happening in the world. It's just super hard to coordinate people to do something like that. So yeah, it's just a kind of like making, first of all, like just getting a moratorium on these like big training runs would be great. I think, I mean, I've been trying to kind of like solicit some feedback from people about this moratorium idea. And like I haven't gotten like a lot of pushback. So many people seem to be on board with moratorium and just like use this moratorium to figure out like how to have a more responsible when it comes to building digital minds on this planet. But yeah, luckily, because of this like massive energy requirements, they're much easier to control than something that is everybody can do there in their basement. They're more close to sort of like enrichment of uranium than they are to, I don't know, some writing scripts.
So you think
Is there anyone?
compute governance is like a real priority area to be working in?
I think so, yeah, something like that. I mean, I don't have a very good model of like how doable it is from the sort of government perspective, which is slow and dumb it's an organism, not a mechanism. So I guess it's possible that the future will rely on some smart people in government, especially in US government. No.
Is there anyone you know that's actively working on the moratorium, or are you spearheading it now? And if so, are you able to say the names of the organizations that are working on it?
I mean, this is like super early, but there are yes, a few organizations who are like actively trying to have some meetings and consultations about it, but I probably shouldn't mention them. They're just trying to. I mean, currently, what's happening is that there is, I feel there's like a widespread acknowledgement that like this current trajectory of like blindly building these uncontrollable digital minds is not great, but there is no common knowledge about it yet. So like people think that they are in minority when it comes to thinking that the current trajectory is bad, but they're not. And like this common knowledge needs to be built, but like you have to be careful to not screw up this common knowledge building, because there are incentives also like on the other side to dismiss this thing and muddle the waters. So yeah, there's like some process happening there.
It's interesting because I don't know if you saw Elias's "We're All Going to Die" podcast.
Of course.
And in that one, I guess like his main idea for what to do with a pile of money would be to like, buy out an island and just get everyone there, just to distract them for a little bit while they're not building. He seemed a little bit like less optimistic that you could do the kind of global coordination.
By the way, fun fact, I was just in Eliezer in Tokyo. Like first time he was in Japan. I never seen happy Eliezer. He was happy.
I'm really happy to hear. That warms my heart.
Yeah, he loved Tokyo, really loved Tokyo, which I also do. So
did you get him dancing?
No. I got like a lot of people dancing, but Eliezer wasn't one of them.
Baby steps. So but he seemed to be a little like less optimistic than you are, maybe that the global coordination that would be required for such a moratorium to work. Also, for example, China, that could work. I talked to a few folks, for example, just to figure out like how far do they think along is China now that ChatGPT came out, and they were like basically just like, oh, China pretty much lost the race at this point because they have limited much of the ChatGPT use in many of.
I think there are two things the two points about China that kind of makes it more of a boogeyman than it is like a real thing. Like one is that it's important to note that these are compute heavy training that produces uncontrollable minds. China has an issue with both of those facts. Like one is that like they have like harder time acquiring compute than US because of the sanctions. I don't know how much harder, but like at least non-zero amount harder. And like, they're not keen at all on uncontrollable minds let loose on their territory. That's why everything, the Baidu Ernie presentation, in that presentation was pre-recorded. Like there's no way they can kind of like take the risk of having a live dialogue with an uncontrollable mind in a way that Microsoft unfortunately doesn't see a problem.
Yeah, one thing that when Eliezer went on the podcast, I was thinking, well, why is he going on a crypto podcast? And he did say it's not like we need more money. Not much we can do with this at this point with me, or like maybe consider donating to or whatever. But he did say kind of like, if you're the type of security nerd that like tries to encrypt their passpords several different times to still doesn't think it's safe, then maybe consider working on AI safety. And so I wrote out this like mega post that it's not published yet, but hopefully soon, on just like why I think security and cryptography are like different mindsets could be much more useful for AI and like everything from infosec concerns, but also to really the security mindset, the game theory, like red teaming that many people in security do. And we have a big community within that in Foresight, all the way to like approaches like federated learning or homomorphic encryption. Andrew Trust had this great paper on building safe AI through homomorphic encryption. So I'm super curious to get your 2 cents on like you also as someone who's straddling both the kind of like security and crypto fields and the AI fields. Do you think that we should be trying to recruit more in these areas? Do you think that's beneficial at all?
Yeah, I think sort of InfoSec is just like robustly good because it makes the outcomes more predictable. Like you can have like some kind of abstraction. Your abstractions are going to be less leaky. Data center is going to contain the processes if it's secure. If it's not secure, who knows what's going to happen? And if your operating system is secure, you can issue like a sudo kill -9. Whereas if it's not secure, like this command is just going to be ignored. So yeah, I think InfoSec seems to be just robustly good. It's not going to be enough once we have superhuman minds, but yeah, I hope it's not going to try to postpone the moment where we have superhuman minds, and then that regime seems like it's massively good.
Cool. Do you want to leave us with perhaps like a more of a hopeful and like image of the future? Have you just become much less hopeful with the past few, let's say, months, year, or is there like a carrot or something that?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very hopeful. I'm very positively kind of surprised that there isn't really. I haven't gotten so far. So far, I haven't gotten like a lot of pushback when it comes to. It's just not a bad. It seems to be just a bad idea to just rush ahead. And not give the world a chance to adjust to the presence of intelligent non-human minds. And if this kind of seems to be, if this builds into a strong consensus, I think the chances of actually coordinating around this are much better than on priors. And if you can coordinate around that, then yeah, like there's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, I do check like midjourney.com like regularly because they're just like so cool pictures, right? And I think this is a general principle, like the stuff that could be built if we can manage to contain the risks could be just really amazing.
Yeah, agree. Maybe in the last minute, if you could leave folks with something, has there been like either an instance in your life that really changed your trajectory, or someone like a mentor of yours that like really shaped your path, or a piece of advice that you got? I think is like really useful for others to hear, maybe as they're a little bit at like earlier stages in their career.
I guess the biggest thing that is I found like important, is sort of like could be like specific to me, as in like I can internalize it, is just use like functional decision theory. Like in the sense that think of yourself as a group of people and think past versions and future versions of yourself as a part of a group that you need to have some kind of negotiations with. And have policies that cover this group instead of like making ad hoc decisions. So, and I have a bunch of examples where I can apply this. I mean, investing is an obvious thing. Like you just, if you just make your decisions ad hoc, you're just gonna lose. Have a policy, have a plan, and then just execute that plan. And you can update the plan, but you always have to have like a good reason to update that plan, even if it seems to go badly.
What I really love is that even for your donations, I think on your website, really, you lay out the plan and how you reason about them, so that I think like people are really aware of your policy. So I think it's really cool. Well,
but also like having like policies kind of makes yourself easier to cooperate with, right? So that's like one really big value.
Yeah, especially when they're communicated well, like you do. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm eager to see how your like recent efforts in general compute and GPU and AI slowdown will go. Please let us know, and I guess we will find out one way or the other, given your timelines very soon.
My usual like joke about this is that wish me luck because you are going to need it.
Yeah, great. Well, no pressure on you, Jaan. We're all pretty much flying on this at this point. No, but seriously, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to all of the fellows for coming on. This was one of, I think we're having 4 quarterly like meetings with a few people that we want to introduce you to in the Foresight community. I really, really thank you, Jaan, for all of the work that you've been doing for our larger community and continue to do. So thanks a lot. And I hope to see many of you either tonight or at one of our workshops in person very soon. So thanks, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day. And yeah, see you very soon. Bye-bye.